Good evening and welcome to Book Passage. I just want to say how fantastic it is to see all these warm bodies sitting in an independent bookstore.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. We really value being able to put on these events. And I'm just saying, you just can't find this kind of experience on Amazon. My name is Melissa Sestaro, and I have the honor of introducing our two authors here in conversation tonight. Gary Shteyngart is author and best-selling and award-winning novels, Super Sad True Love Story, Absurdist.
I don't even know.
Absurdistan, the Russian Debutante's Handbook. And tonight, Gary comes to us with his absolutely remarkable memoir, Little Failure. This is an emotionally complex story teeming with Gary's side-splitting humor and the chaos and heartbreak surrounding his immigrant upbringing. These are the ingredients that make him the author we love so much. Kelly Corrigan is the author of the best-selling memoir, The Middle Place and Lift. She is an incredible force here in the Bay Area. You should know that through her creation of Notes and Words, a venue where writers and musicians take the stage, Kelly has raised almost $4 million for the Children's Hospital in Oakland.
By myself. No one else was involved. Awesome.
That's right. She also has a brand new book coming out next month called Glitter and Glue. I have read an advanced copy and I can tell you it is stunning. And you are going to want to get this book the day it comes out. She's also doing an event with us at Dominican on March 5th, and I would tell everyone here to get their tickets tonight, once the word gets out about this fantastic book. Let's please give our authors a super true warm welcome to Gary Shteyngart and Kelly Corrigan.
They gave us microphones, and we will use them reluctantly if necessary. But I feel that I'm one of the louder people in the state of California. And I'm just hoping that you can stay with me. Can you do it?
Can you hear me now? What?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll use this. Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Is that better?
You should
Do
talk.
I have to use it?
Yep, you do.
All right, that's my husband. Hi, Edward. Is this better? Okay. This is our own little super sad true love story, isn't it, honey? Okay, so your book's been translated into 26 languages. He has also been named by the New Yorker as one of the 20 best writers under 40.
I'm 41 now. But...
Right, no, it's all over for you now, but there was a moment there where there was hope for you.
Window.
Yep, but it's in print, so you can frame it and send it to your parents.
Oh, I framed it.
Yeah. And then, you know, the best books of the year lists by the Washington Post and New York Times, et cetera, et cetera. His last novel was on 40 of them, which has got to be just about every single one of them.
Yeah, the National Enquirer has a book list. Unbelievable.
Entertainment.
Motor Trend.
Yeah. And all this with a totally unpronounceable last name. Can you say it?
And Shteyngart.
Great. That's why we call him Gary S.
Yeah.
So we have a few things in common. We're both at Random House, which is sort of the most trivial thing. We both fancy a pop culture reference and actually both mentioned the Divinals in our last book. Right. When I Think About You.
I touch myself.
Great. That's our go for the night. We've both, in times of trouble, stolen toilet paper.
Yes.
We
I stole some from the room.
I did too. That's both gone.
High five.
And then we both fought panic attacks. I hope not right at this very moment, but
I got stuff.
okay, cool.
Anyone?
Anyone's feeling anxious?
This is New York out of there, which is extra strong.
You are state of mind.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we're both obsessed with our parents a little bit.
Oh boy.
So let's start there. Tell
Okay.
these guys about your parents.
They're nice people.
That's a lie.
Okay. Complete dysfunctional people? No, that's also a lie. They're immigrants from Russia. My father was an engineer, like all Soviet Jews, a nuclear engineer. My mother, like all Soviet Jewish women, was a pianist. They met over their love of music and their love of one day making a Gary come alive. Igor, right? No, Gary's not my real name.
No, that's for real. It's true.
For real, yeah. I was born Igor Semyonovich Shteyngart. Actually, the real name of my family, as I found out in writing this memoir, is Shteyngart, which means stonehorn.
That's so much hotter.
It says Igor Stonehorn, which is like a Bavarian porn star name. Pretty hot. Igor Stonehorn.
I think that could have been your book trailer. James Franco could have done.
For those of you who haven't seen it, there's a wonderful book trailer in which James Franco and I make out for a long time, wearing fluffy bathrobes.
It's really compelling.
It's on YouTube.
So tell us about your dad's disposition towards you.
Well, he's a nice guy. He's very proud of me, but he sometimes says things like, I can't do the Russian. Oh, well. I just read on the Russian internet that many people think you and your novels will soon be forgotten. Or on a ranking of writers that just came out on the internet, you were number 19. Whereas David Remnick, the editor of The New Yorker, was number 17. I'm just saying.
And there was a physical element to your relationship.
He liked to hit me a little bit, but you know, it's cultural. We come out of place here.
Yeah.
There's a Russian saying, he who does not hit does not love.
Well, you come back around to that idea because at some point he decides that he's not going to hit you anymore.
And he stops hitting me, and it's very painful.
It's like the end of the family romance, I think.
That's what I called it, yes.
Put it.
Yeah, one day after he hit me, we were walking around Little Neck, Queens, and he said, you know, I shouldn't have done that. And I thought, but you have to do that. You're the father, and I'm the son. Don't you love me anymore?
Yeah. I think to me it reminded me of Where the Wild Things Are, with that idea that like you're supposed to be in charge, you're supposed to know what you're doing, and if you don't, then I feel like everything's going to spin out of control.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if you're doing it completely wrong, I want you to do it with conviction.
Yeah, no, I missed it so much. I mean, I started hitting myself a little bit.
Yeah.
It was over, but I never had his strength. He's a strong guy.
Yeah. And your mother, who you said gave you the ability to be fascinated, and also you said who looks half Jewish, which at the time was too Jewish by half.
That was the Soviet Union for you, yeah.
So tell us about their marriage.
Well, they met because they loved music, but then when they came to the States, they had to get jobs that were, you know, real jobs. Capitalism will do that to you. So he worked at a nuclear laboratory, and my mother worked at a Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Do you remember that stuff? Yeah. The people that helped get Soviet Jews out. Oh, by the way we got out was in 1979. There was this big exchange of Jews for grain. The Soviet Union had a bad grain harvest. They needed more grain. America always needed more Jews. Russia needs grain to run, America needs Jews to run, so a bargain was struck, and I was traded for 300 loaves of bread and a croissant. Still doubtful who got the better end of that. But when we got to America, you know, they worked their butts off, as all immigrants do, but they fought a lot too. There was a lot of tension in the family because my mother, this was the tragic part, is that her mother was dying in Russia. Her sister later became very ill too, with perfectly treatable cancer in the States, but a death sentence in Russia. And in a way, she moved here so that I wouldn't have to join the Red Army and die very quickly. But the result was that she missed out on the decline of her own family. So I'm obviously very grateful for that. But that caused a lot of tension between my parents, and The two words that I constantly mention in this book in Russian, one is razvod, which means divorce, which was the word I would hear every morning, and родственники, which is relatives, because all the razvod fights were about родственники, relatives on my mother's and my father's side. And this is very typical. The child becomes sort of a diplomat between the two parents, walking back and forth, saying, Mommy says to tell you, that she doesn't love you, but Tasha's in the fridge. Good times.
But your assumption all through your childhood was that the minute you left, the divorce would go through.
The thing was, we were so poor. We were like, government cheese for my grandma, food stamps. Yeah, I love government cheese. It's so orange. You can use it as a light source. Fascinating thing. But I thought that if we were poor enough, and I went to a Hebrew school where there were all these very wealthy kids, and I thought, if they got divorced, how the hell are we going to support two households when we can't support one? So it was partly thinking, my God, I'm going to be really poor, and partly thinking there's only three of us in this foreign country. How without this tight family unit, and these Russian family units are very, very tight, obsessively so. I shouldn't say just Russian. I know a lot of my friends who are Indian or Chinese or Korean also come from family units that are welded together. It's a very different concept of family than it is in America, where everyone just goes their own happy, separate way and does things to themselves. Or by themselves. Every time I think about you, I touch myself.
I want to finish the line that time.
I'm sorry. Every time I think about you,
I touch myself.
It sounds better with you finishing.
Yeah. So you go off to Oberlin.
Yeah. One really goes off to Oberlin.
Wait. Before we get there, so let's talk about the role that writing played in your young life.
Right.
So you wrote several novels in your boyhood.
I started, boyhood, I love that word. I started in my boyhood at age 5 when my grandmother, the one who died in Leningrad very slowly.
And you're still in Russia. You were in Russia till you were 7.
I'm in Russia till I'm 7. So in Russia, she asked, when I was 5 years old, she asked me to write a novel. Because she was a journalist for Evening Leningrad, which is a much better newspaper than Morning Leningrad. TMZ of Leningrad papers. Вечерний Leningrad was quality. And so she said, and I suffered from terrible asthma, I was always dying of asthma, and one day she said, hey, asthma boy, you wanna write a novel? I'll pay you in cheese, because I love this cheese. It was government cheese too, I guess, in a sense. So she paid me little pieces of this kind of yellow plasticky Soviet cheese for each page I wrote. And I was obsessed with Lenin, because the biggest statue of Lenin in Leningrad was right outside of our window, so I'd see him every morning. We called him the Latin Lenin, because he looked like he was going to rumba, yeah. And every morning I'd kind of hug his pedestal when I wasn't dying from asthma. And so she said, write about Lenin. And at that point I was also obsessed with, there's a picture at the very front of this book, the nameplates, where I'm reading this very big Talmudic-looking book. As a 5-year-old, of course, wearing tights and sailor outfit. That's all Russian children are supposed to wear at age 5. And this is the history of the 1917 Civil War. So I was obsessed with the Civil War in Russia. So in my book, Lenin meets a magical goose, a talking goose. As he would. And together they fly in and invade Finland to create a socialist revolution in Finland. But then we find out that while Lenin is Bolshevik, the goose is Menshevik. And Lenin eats the goose. And my grandma's like, well, maybe he doesn't eat the goose, he just exiles him to Mexico, maybe. Ice pick. And we also find out in the end that Lenin has asthma. And so she paid me 100 pieces of cheese, and I loved it. I mean, it was this sort of, it wasn't just the cheese, it was the love, and I got this really stupid idea that maybe writing books would make people love you,
Mm-hmm.
In Russia, maybe that's the case, but...
Aww.
No, well, novelists...
I want to say aww.
No, novelists don't get any love. I mean, now that I'm doing memoir, yeah.
Yeah.
I was at a university, I'm not going to mention the University of Oklahoma by name, but a woman there said, I was giving a reading, she said, "Excuse me, Mr. Shteyngart, how do I know when a book's been fictionated?" And I said, "What?" She said, "When it's not true." And I said, "Well, it'll say novel on it or something." She said, "Oh, good. I'm going to avoid those from now on because I want things that are true." So I'm so happy to have my first non-fictionated book.
Oh, she's so happy right now.
She is happy.
Yeah.
It's,
Whipping through that.
it's dedicated to her.
So that was your first novel.
First
then you
novel.
had the second one that you wrote, also in your boyhood. I'll use the word again since you seem to like
I
it.
love boyhoods.
And so tell us about Miss S and the moment that you came to find a little connection with your classmates, or as you say, a lesser brand of hate, when you crossed the line from unclubbable fruitcake to tolerated eccentric.
That's right. They were written in these giant books. Remember these? So this one is called Invasion from Outer Space. It's about 100 pages long. It's a photocopy of it. Chapter 1, Something is Wrong. Yes, it certainly was. So when we emigrated, just to set up the section I'll read, when we emigrated from the USSR, I had to learn English. Obviously, at age 7 I didn't speak English, but also Hebrew because I was sentenced to 8 years of Hebrew school. A crime I did not commit, but in 1980 was a difficult time to be a Russian in America because of Ronald Reagan's evil empire speech and all those movies, Red Dawn, Red Gerbil, Red Hamster.
The day after.
The Day After was great, yeah. That's mentioned a lot in the book. God, I love it. And also Fred's, the English version.
I'd forgotten about it.
Oh. Well, anyway, I had to pretend to the kids in Hebrew school that I was actually born in East Berlin, not in Russia. So you know things are bad, but you have to convince Jewish kids that you're actually German. So, anywho, I decided to write these science fiction novels to hope that the kids would like me. So this is what happened. This is a new substitute teacher who comes to Hebrew school, fresh from Hebrew School Academy, called Miss S. That's her name. On one of her first days on the job, Miss S asks us all to bring in our favorite items in the world and to explain why they make us who we are. I bring in my latest toy, a dysfunctional Apollo rocket whose capsule pops off with the press of a lever, but only under certain atmospheric conditions. Humidity must be below 54%. And explain that I've even written my own novel. This passes largely unremarked as the latest batch of Star Wars X-Wing fighters and My Little Ponies are paraded around. Finally, Miss S holds up a sneaker and explains that her favorite activity is jogging. "P.U.!" a boy cries out of the sneaker and holds his nose. And everyone except me laughs their wicked child laugh. I am shocked. Here is a young, kind, pretty teacher, and the children are intimating that her feet smell. Only me and my 200-pound Leningrad fur are allowed to smell around here. I look to Miss S so worried that she will cry, but instead she laughs, and then goes on about how running makes her feel good. She has laughed at herself and emerged unscathed. After we have all finished explaining who we are, Miss S calls me over to her desk. "You really wrote a novel?" she says. "Yes," I say. "It is called The Challenge." May I read it? You may read it. I will brink it. And brink it I do. With the worried admonition, "Please don't lose it," Miss S, okay? And then it happens. At the end of the English period, when a book about a mouse who has learned how to fly in an airplane has been thoroughly dissected, Miss S announces, "And now Gary will read from his novel." His what? But it doesn't matter, because I'm standing there holding my composition notebook straight from the Square Deal Notebook people of Dayton, Ohio, zip code 45463. And looking out at me are the boys beneath their little flying saucer yarmulkes, and the girls with their sweet aromatic bangs, their blouses studded with stars. And there's Miss S, who I'm already terribly in love with, but who I've recently learned has a fiance. Not sure what that means, can't be good. bright American face is not just encouraging me, but priding me on. Am I scared? No, I'm eager. Eager to begin my life. Introduction, they say. The mysterious race. Before the age of dinosaurs, there were human life on Earth. They looked just like the man of today, but they were a lot more intelligent than the man of today. Slowly, Miss S says. Read slowly, Gary. Let us enjoy the words. I breathe that in. Miss S wants to enjoy my words. And then I continue slowly. They built all kinds of spaceships and other wonders, but at that time the Earth circled the moon because the moon was bigger than the Earth. One day, a gigantic comet came and blew up the moon to the size it is today. As I'm reading it, despite the errors, I'm hearing a different language come out of my mouth. I do full justice to the many misspellings, the Earth circled the moon, and the Russian accent is still thick, but I am speaking in what is more or less comprehensible English. And I am speaking, along with my strange new English voice, I am hearing something entirely foreign to the squealing and shouting that constitutes Hebrew school. Silence. The children are silent. They are listening to my every word, and they will listen to the story for the next 5 weeks as well, because Miss S will designate the end of every English period as Gary Novel Time. Shout out throughout the English period, when will Gary read already? And I will sit there in my chair, oblivious to all but Miss S.'s smile, excused from following the discussion of the mouse who somehow learned how to fly, so that I may go over the words I will soon read to my adoring audience. And God bless these kids for giving me a chance. May their God bless them, everyone.
Block, that the words fall in line like soldiers at reveille. And to that, I just want to say, fuck you!
I could just tell that you were going to use those exact words.
Maybe other people have already used them, but I just want to get in line in the chorus instead.
At the National Book Awards, they had a whole chorus line. Shteyngart.
They don't say your last name, they can't pronounce it.
Okay, well, fuck you, Shteyngart.
Yeah. So you always wanted to be a writer. You always had this idea, and you define it in this beautiful way as an instrument too finely set to the human condition. It's nice, right?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Most of these books are outsourced to India, so I don't even write them.
No. Whoever got that, that's a bonus, right?
Yeah,
that's
critique from Calcutta.
Yeah, you give them a couple extra.
You got 200 more rupees for that.
Curry dinners, yeah. What is it about writing that you love so much?
Before I even say that, let me just say that I can't do anything else. You know, I can't fry an egg. I can't be a paralegal. I mean, those are the most essential
Those are pretty
skills.
much the two options. Writer, paralegal, egg fryer.
Well, and Google here, but I can't do that either.
Yeah.
I'm no Brin, you know.
Yeah.
There was a very good chance that we could have emigrated to San Francisco. There was a big fight between my parents. My mother thought San Francisco was a much more European-looking city than New York, and somewhat less crime-ridden at the time, so she really wanted to move here. In which case, I probably would be now pretty rich and coding things and living in Sausalito, my pied-à-terre.
Yeah.
But here I am instead.
There's an idea that keeps coming through, and so for instance, like you went to the Catskills one time in the summer of 1985, and you say, someone says, Gary, tell a joke, and that's what you had become known for, and you said, I want to close my eyes and be in this moment forever, but I understand what these children want from me, and I tell the joke. And then later you say, what I do is part performance art, part an eloquent plea for help, part unprocessed outer burrow aggression, and part just me being a jackass. And then the last thing you said that sort of broke my heart a little bit, which you do in this book, is you say that you yearn to communicate sans lampshade. So I want to know, is that what you think that we want of you, is more joke telling and more humor? Like, could you even imagine writing a book that wasn't satire?
Well, I think this is...
Yes, sorry.
Right.
Or something that's sort of loaded with humor.
Right.
Like, could you imagine staying in the serious moment longer?
At this point, I'm a creature of the focus groups. And They
You
want
both
humor.
answered the question and demonstrated the answer to the question. So I think
There's a
we
word
know
in
where he
philosophy
is with that.
No, I'd like to write a book. I mean, in writing this book, what I'm doing is I'm kind of having a fire sale. I mean, the first reviewer who read this book, we were having dinner and she said, wow, I know you better than my husband Howie, who I've been married to for 20 years. In this book, there's nothing left of me that's not given away, including photographs of me wearing a kimono. So it's all, in a very small kimono.
Yeah.
It leaves nothing to the imagination. I'm sorry, I just lost every sale I could have tonight. But I'd love to write a book that doesn't have, a Russian Nevish Jewish protagonist, and and it's not wall-to-wall humor. And in doing this book, I think the next book we can try something different. On the other hand, Philip Roth is a lover. Philip Roth is a lover I really admire.
I thought you said lover, and I
Roth is a
thought,
writer
well,
I
now
really-
we're going to take a right turn.
Philip Roth is a writer I really love, who is my lover also.
Franco's going to be livid.
Well, after he kissed Seth Rogen, a little piece of me died. In that other video.
Sorry, this is a crime, but I have to make it a quick announcement. If anyone here has a black SUV decal that says renewable energy, would they mind please?
That is so awesome! That is satire, people!
I know. Thank you, Northern California.
If anyone has that car, if they could move it, someone needs to get out of their space. Thank you.
There's also a flammable Tesla in that needs to be doused with liberal tears. I don't have enough tear ducts working. I could probably do it if you give me a number.
That is a moment to be paused.
Wow.
I don't even know what we were talking about. Who cares? Because there's a black SUV with renewable energy.
Notice how nobody got up. Everyone's too ashamed of it. I'd rather be towed. Divorce proceedings tonight.
Yeah, and you should be towed. If it's yours, you should not get up right now.
Oh, I'm sorry, wherever you are.
We'll all chip in.
Yeah, we'll all chip in together.
Gary got a baby band.
Yeah.
But so you must have feared with, and I think you mentioned it, that with memoir that you're going to slip into vulgar nostalgia.
Yes.
And that, and so I think I noticed this thing you were doing throughout, and I wondered if it was to sort of counteract that, which is that you call out the fact, you remind the reader that that they're reading a book. So you sort of take a remove from it, you say, the book that you hold in your hands, or as I now type this. Were you conscious of trying to call out the fact that you're telling the story of your life and therefore maybe pulling us out of the story of your life?
A little bit, yeah, because I think that, Nabokov talked about this, the Russian word for it is porthless, which is a kind of vulgarity, but it's a vulgarity that's, the way I see it, it's very steeped in nostalgia. I come from a drunken, nostalgic bunch of people who, 3 vodkas in, will start talking about how great it was back in the shtetl when we were all being herded to death. It's all this endless love.
I'm Irish, it's the same thing.
It's the same, well, of course, that's why we're on stage together. It's a couple of drinks or a couple of
brothers from another mother.
Brother from another mother. Yeah, it's just like a cultural mother exchange program.
Yeah.
I didn't want that. I didn't, and all the writers I admire, Saul Bellow used to call it potato love, this kind of very easy affection. And in writing this book, it was interesting. I went back and I interviewed a lot of people that I'd spent time with from the Hebrew School, Stuyvesant High School, Oberlin, and some of the happiest memories I had, they never happened. I always believed that during an acid trip at Stuyvesant, I hijacked a number 2 train and taken it to the Bronx and liberated everyone in it, but it never happened. Thankfully, I'm not incarcerated. But those are the kinds of details that I really thought had taken place, and then I would quiz people and they'd say, no, that's not who you were at all. And so I began this exercise that every morning I'd wake up and write this book and say, okay, I'm 9 years old today. What's my life like? What are mom and dad fighting about? how am I going to survive Hebrew school without having the 60 cents to buy the Carvel cookie ice cream that makes you a human being. I have a Chewbacca action figure, but he only has one paw. How do I sculpt the other paw? Those are discards of the Carvel ice cream cookie. So it was this endless, are they going to play that song, The Russians Are Liars, which they set to the tune of Eye of the Tiger that they used to play in New York after the Soviets shot down the Korean airliner in 1983. It all came flaming back. Really happy memories. And I'm not the kind of New Yorker that sees a shrink 5 days a week. I see a shrink 4 days a week.
For 12 years.
For 12 years.
Which I did the math on the way over here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm no math mind, that's why I write books. But I mean, you're getting close to like 400 grand on that thing.
He turned.
I mean, not that maybe you've never added it up and I just took you to a place that you don't want to go.
I'm seen as a charity case by the entire psychiatric community. It's almost nothing.
Right.
And this book is half dedicated to my analyst and half to my parents. Together they form the symbiosis that allows this to happen.
Right.
Therapy. What was the question?
We're just talking about writing and how you like to. You were.
Oh, right.
It was clear that you were conscious that you didn't want to dupe anyone or bring them too far into it without reminding them every so often, like, this is a book, I'm writing a book.
Well, yeah, and I didn't want this to be sort of a postmodern annoying thing either, but I did want to realize, the reader to realize that, even if I'm channeling my 9-year-old self, I'm still a 41-year-old man, before an Apple Macintosh computer, and so that comes up every once in a while.
Yeah. Tell us, just to back up a little bit, tell us the creation myth as described in the Gnora, which is going to involve some other explanations.
When I was, so things weren't going so well in Hebrew school despite the challenge and invasion from outer space, which culminates in a race riot, by the way.
I know, because you said that the whole, the kind of the apparatus you created with this challenge was to figure out which race is right, which I had circled as it.
Yes, and I grew up in fairly racist kind of mentality, racist place. Russian Jews, Soviet Jews were quite scared of people who were different, including blacks and Latinos. So the planet there were 2 planets at war. One was Atlanta, which had a lot of tax breaks and a lot of corporate tax breaks and a lot of incentivization, and the other planet was called the planet Lopez. Horrifying to read this today, but we were talking to a kid who at 11 years old had a subscription to the National Review, and at 11 and a half got a card with 2 rifles crossed above an eagle, my membership in the National Rifle Association. At age 11, Gary Shteyngart, welcome to the Igor Shteyngart, welcome to the National Rifle Association. Because it's never too early for the Second Amendment. But then, so that got me some points with the kids, but I was still, a loser. And I decided, so there was endless Torah and Talmud being thrown at us, and nobody understood what any of this was about. So I wrote a version of the Torah called the Gnora, in which Exodus became Sexodus. And this disturbed the rabbis greatly, but it also won me my first American friends, because it was sort of edgy, A lot of references to John McEnroe, who was sort of the bad boy of the time, and a lot of loving references to Brooke Shields, who really wanted to appropriate the Jewish race, very desperately. I was just talking to her husband, and I said, "Is she?" And he said,
"Oh,
no."
I wish you didn't have to know that.
No Brooke Shieldowitz.
I wish you could go to your grave thinking maybe she was one of you.
It was an innocent time, the Hebrew school kids got a picture of her in People magazine in a bikini, and this was passed around under the Talmud,
So give us this is called the 3-word game. Okay. America in 3 words, from a distance, on first impression, and today.
Oh, good Lord.
Yep.
And so this is, I failed my GRE. This is hard.
So from a distance.
Hamburger.
Uh-huh. Now you need 2 more words.
Oh. With cheese? get into Florida Law School. Shocking.
On first impression, 3 words.
Fruity smell. Deodorant.
And today.
Today?
Today, maybe more broadly than today, but if you want it to be today, it could be today.
3 words?
Yes, please.
Good luck failing empire? Is that 4 words?
It might be, but as I said, I'm adamant.
Yeah. Good luck, though. I love this country. It's one of the best in North America.
So after all that therapy, are you the sleekly rational animal you seek to be? And have you been able to decouple the rage from the humor, which were a big goal of yours?
Oh, I'm great now.
Okay, fantastic.
Everything's fine. No, it's not bad, you know. We are about to terminate analysis, which is sad, because I'll miss them. I know.
Richard C. Lacey, right?
Richard C. Lacey,
that's
MD,
the dedication.
PhD, yeah. Good people.
Same guy all these years.
Same guy all these years. The moment we saw each other, it was love. I mean,
Yeah.
we knew. I tried a different psychiatrist who was a very attractive woman who was always wearing these fishnets. But that's all we talked about was her fishnets for session after session. And I realized, you know, that wasn't going to work. But this guy, kind of, he's a big furry guy. He's half Armenian, which I love because my first girlfriend was half Armenian. So, he's a big diamond expert. You know, in psychoanalysis, the analyst doesn't say anything. But at one point I said, you know, I'm getting engaged. So I guess I'll go to Tiffany's and get a diamond. And he said, for the first time in like 5 years, he said, "What are you, crazy? You know what it costs over there? I got a woman on Union Square for a third the price you can give me."
So what did you learn in 12 years of therapy? Like, what would you say, like, your big takeaways are? I mean, could you even...
When I started psychoanalysis, I was dating a woman who went to prison a year later for bashing in the head of a guy who looked like me with a carpenter's hammer.
The story is told in detail in the book, so now the sales are going back up.
Yeah, yeah. That was my idea of love, was somebody who, you know, clawed to death. Not to death. We went to a coma. No, I'm sorry. He lost a part of his ear. No, this story's getting better and better. No. And then she spent a year in Florida. She was getting her MFA in writing and clawing. So that was my love life, and also I was working on my first book, The Russian Debutante's Hand Job, whatever, for like so long, and I was too ashamed to send it out. You know, I really thought it was crap. Maybe it is crap, but I was too ashamed to do it, and I was afraid of what my parents would say because there weren't a lot of books about the Russian experience, the Russian immigrant experience, I should say, of my generation. There were certainly Nabokov and Nabokov and all these other wonderful writers. But within a few sessions, I'd broken up with Hammer Girl, and I submitted my book to Cheng-Rae Lee, who was the Korean American author whom I admired very much as a writer, but also as an immigrant writer who was able to tell the truth very painfully about, the immigrant experience in a much less humorous way and what I thought in a more poignant way than I was doing. So I sent him under Dr. Lacey's tutelage. I decided, okay, what the hell? I'm probably a bad writer, but I'll send it to him to apply to this MFA program at Hunter College, which is a great school. It costs $800 and you get all the fries you can eat. So I applied it and he said, "I love this." And in 2 weeks he got me a book deal. So that was sort of the beginning for me. And then everything just fell into place after that over the course of a decade.
So if you started therapy and it got you a book deal and helped you get engaged, that's a pretty good therapist, right?
Amen.
Yeah. Amen to Richard C. Lacey.
Yeah, if anyone finds himself in New York, just knock on his doorstep.
Yeah, business is booming for
business
right
is
now.
Booming.
All these people who don't have any problems but want to be a great writer.
Yeah. There's a lot of writers. I'm not going to mention the people by name, although ask me afterwards. I'm not going to. Tom Pinchin's secret stays with me.
Okay, so before I let these guys ask some questions, I just have to thank you for some of these great lines. And maybe you could finish them if you recall. So puberty, puberty endowed you with bitch tits.
Oh yeah, bitch tits. Yeah. I miss those. It's a self-erotic period in my life.
Yeah.
They came at just the right time. But they left a little too late.
Are you done? I feel like you might go one step further and I don't want to miss it. Most days I have my head so far up my family's ass I can...
Almost taste borscht? Yes.
And your friend John is the last person I want to talk about before these guys take a whack at you. That his face was folding into sort of a grieving...
Turtle-like expression?
Grieving Jewish turtle.
Oh.
Right?
That's so visual.
Right? This makes me want to ask you, because I do this sometimes when I'm trying to find a way to describe something. I make the face that I'm trying to describe, and then if I can't imagine it, then I have to go to a mirror and make the face and sort of see if I can see anything. Did you make that grieving Jewish turtle face?
I did that. I watched turtles on YouTube and fiddler on the roof together. I also read everything out loud when I write it, because and it helps, and people can tell that the dialogue is good, because otherwise people write the way they think writers should write, like they did in the 17th century, but that's not cool.
No. So tell these guys a little bit about John. And then we'll give it up here and let this.
Yeah, John was I call him the benefactor. He was an older gentleman.
How much older?
He never revealed it.
Oh right, but in your sense,
it's hard
20
to
years.
tell. Americans look so great.
Yeah.
I'll meet somebody who I think is 20, and they're in a nursing home. How is this possible? And they're like, well, we just live well in this country. I gotta go back. It's almost dinner in the Casa retirement. So you could be between 40 and 93. And he took me under his wing. He was a head writer for a bunch of soap operas, but at the time he was making a documentary called Only Children, which he was an only child. I'm an only. Russians don't breed in captivity, so I'm an only child. Others were only children. There was a dominatrix, and it's complicated. So we became friends through this documentary. But he really said, he took my first book and he started editing it himself because I was just such a mess, and he was a kind of father figure to me. The American papa I never had, so sleekly rational but I started being a real jackass to him because I didn't know what to do with this kind of unconditional love. The only previous unconditional love I knew was from my grandmother, who came to this country, who, her life, I was her life, and she would feed me. The bitch that's happened because she would buy me, 17 Klondike bars a day. And feed me like a goose for slaughter. But I loved that. That was so unconditional and wonderful. And he was the same way, but I rebelled against that because I thought, you mentioned earlier that when my father stopped hitting me, I thought, God, you're not doing your job. You're not being a father. You have to hit me, And that was the sense with him, is that this was too easy, Later I talk about, one of the theories I have is that my parents never quite adjusted to the softness of this country. They came from a very hard place, and this is true of many other people from other terrifying societies like Russia, that they never quite got the fact that here you can do things that
you can let your shoulders down.
You can let your shoulders down, you can go to an MFA program, and if you mess up, you can always go back to law school, but you can try things. You can try to do things if you want to, and that was very hard. And John he said to me, you're a writer, and I believe that you will be a published writer, that this will be your career. I rebelled against words like that. I kind of didn't want to hear that. I said, no, my mother's nickname for me was Little Failure. I said, I'm the little failure, And I was drinking up a storm at that time, and, and he said, look, I'm not going to be your friend until you seek help.
He wrote you an incredible letter that you must have kept because
it's in the book. It's
Yeah.
just long, and I can't do justice to it, but it's the best writing in the book, is I think this letter that he wrote, which is absolutely fantastic and so on the money, and examines not just me, but my relationship with my parents and a relationship with any future children I might have, and it's just this incredibly brilliant intervention, if you know, to use the lingo, but it's
And it worked.
And it worked. Also, I owed him a lot of money, and he said, "Get on with the therapy. I want the money back now."
Yeah. So he kind of underwrote therapy in the beginning.
He did underwrite therapy in the beginning, yeah. And so,
Where is he now?
He's living in New York. He's
Yeah.
a happy guy, you know.
Does he like the book?
He likes the book quite a bit, and he was
Yeah.
the first person that I sent it to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just in Seattle, and he's from the Pacific Northwest, and I saw some of his family. I mean, these people do mean a lot to me.
Yeah, that's nice. All right. So, what do y'all want to ask him?
Questions, complaints, you know. My first reading began.
Suggested edits.
My first reading began in New York. A Russian woman gets up, says, "I am a Republican, and I think you and Woody Allen and Philip Roth have destroyed Judaism."
Thank you. Good night.
It begins. But I like questions like that, so please.
There are no Republicans in Marin, so we.
We can bring one in from. I don't know where you bring one in from. Where's that Central
LA,
Park?
maybe LA.
San Diego.
Yes, there they are. Santa Barbara. Yeah.
I haven't read the book yet. I will read
You will be
it.
slow.
Thank you.
And I would love to know, after this whole journey with Russia and immigration and your parents, how has it informed how you chose who to love and how you're going to choose to parent?
Well, our kid is only 3 months old, so
Not
thank you. I'm no expert on parenting yet. I'm not calling him little failure or
That's a good idea.
snotty or any of the other nicknames that I grew up with. Yeah. My parents had a lot of love. I mean, I think it's very, you know, when you see a little creature before you, all these biological instincts kick in. They kick in for me, they kicked in for them, I'm sure. You know, the kid goes to get his immunization and this giant needle comes out, and I'm a selfish person, God knows, but I thought, God, stick me with that thing, not him. You know, all those things come up. In terms of parenting, what I've learned is that, and this is cultural, this is very cultural, because there are cultures where children really are seen as extensions of their parents. It seems bizarre from an American standpoint, but they really are. My parents have always thought that I am simply them plus more, you know, that if they came and they earned, you know, some money as engineers, then the next step is I would have to, they said you're too dumb to be a doctor, but you know, you can go to law school and earn money that way. You know, funny because lawyers are now being fired left and right, whereas writers never had a profession to begin with. But you know, it was this very, I learned that you can't, it's a journey that goes in the blink of an eye, the lifetime does. You want to steer kids in a good direction, but you can't define who they are in the way that people did, and certainly when I was growing up among my parents, you know. If my kid ends up being a Tea Party Hasid, well, that's his journey, you know, and that I would support that as well, you know, while crying a lot. But that's what it would be. And in terms of love, well, I think all the books I've written, I mean, Super Sad True Love Story has love in the title. I think in one way or another they were ways to talk about love, because love, I mean, I had my first girlfriend, as you will find out in his memoir, when I was in college. I went to Oberlin because that's where people who can't find love anywhere else, the elephant men of the world, you know, it is possible for them to discover love.
Or philosophy majors.
Or philosophy majors, right? In Oberlin, one can find an equally hirsute person to fall in love with you. And I did, and I found a woman and who was different from the mold of Oberlin. We were both outsiders. I was from some messed up immigrant stuff. She was from North Carolina, which was considered, you know, a little out there. Everyone was from New York or San Francisco and Oberlin. And we really bonded, and it was the first time I was able to talk to somebody without all these personas that I had, you know, the Red Gerbil, or Gary Gnu III, author of the Gonora, or all this kind of, or my whole Republican persona that I would sometimes put out, or what they called me at Oberlin, Scary Gary, because I could smoke more marijuana than any other citizen of Ohio. With her, I could finally talk to somebody and reveal all the things that are in the book. You know, talk about my parents in an honest way, not just in a humorous way. And without her, I think, and that's the time when I started writing the Russian Debutante's Handbook. So these two things really merged together. The idea that I could talk honestly with a woman and also write about love at the same time. So that's really where that began. And after our relationship ended, I was very bereft because I had all these friends, but they didn't seem as real as she did. You know.
Has she seen the book?
I don't know if she's seen the book. I know that we're still friends, and she lives up in Boston, and I'm sometimes up there. So we recently had dinner. She's doing great. She was very kind in that, being Scary Gary at Oberlin, my memory is not so good. When it happened, I majored in the Beatles with acid minor. And so she had all these letters that we'd written each other. Before the intertube, people sent each other 15, 20-page letters. And reading these letters is amazing. Holy crap, how did people write all that stuff? But they're beautiful letters. You know, she's a doctor, she's not a writer, but she wrote so wonderfully and so expressively, and with both humor and the kind of sadness. She wrote about her grandfather who was dying. She wrote about what it was like to be from the South in an environment, you know, Oberlin, that was a little challenging for her. I mean, it was all just incredible. And because those letters were saved, I was able to write those chapters very easily. So I do owe her a lot, and I do owe letter writing a lot.
And you married an immigrant?
No, daughter of immigrants.
Daughter of immigrants. Tell us a little bit about your lady.
I can't because she's in the audience.
No, let's point her out.
No.
No?
Yes, she's lovely.
Let's guess. Let's bring three.
Yeah.
Just gonna stand up and guess.
Oh no, oh God.
Where's the baby?
The baby is in San Francisco, visiting my wife's parents and sister live here, so grandpa and grandma are playing with little guy.
What are your parents like as grandparents?
Not bad. You know, this is what's so fascinating to me is, you know, my grandmother, who I love more than anyone in the world, I don't think she was that great a mom to my dad. I mean, he loved her, but I could sense the tension from a mile away, you know, a kilometer away, I should say, back then. But she was this amazing grandmother, and I think, you know, my parents were decent parents, but as the memoir shows, you know, it was ups and downs. But I think with the grandkid, all they can do is just love and love and love.
I often say I'm so glad my mother's still alive because just seeing her with my children is just rewriting everything.
Right. It's rewriting everything. So had this memoir been written, you know, 10 years after they'd been playing with my kids, it would have been called My Mommy, Daddy, and Me.
That memoir is called Glitter and Glue, and it comes out because my kids are 10 and 12, and let me tell you.
This is going to be a love fest you don't want to miss.
That's right.
3 generations of Oregon love.
Yeah, baby. Who else has a question? Yeah.
If your son grew up a little bit and decided he wanted to be a writer, what advice would you give?
Oh, God. Then physical violence would have to ensue. I'm sorry. There's no other way. Will there even be readers when he grows up in 20 years?
A blogger, maybe?
A blogger. He wants to go a blogger. Okay, there you go. A blogger. Daddy, I want to be a blogger when I grow up. Yeah, sure. I mean, maybe a script writer. No, I mean, if something will exist, as Franzen once said, you know, welcome to fiction, the new poetry. I hope he doesn't do it because he sees that I do it, you know. I don't like that kind of, I never saw my dad as an engineer being like, whoa, can't wait to design a nuclear reactor like you, Dad. You know. So I wouldn't either encourage or discourage it, but I would sit him down, show him my tax returns, and do other stuff that would give him an idea. But in the end, like I said, yes, I would encourage it. And I've seen nepotism in action all the time in all fields, and it feels horrifying when I see it. But how do you stop yourself from doing it when it's your own kid? So stop me before I nep again.
No, I'd say nep away.
Nep away.
Yeah.
Your voice is so original, and it seems to come just straight from within you. And you said that one of the, well, I remember you mentioned several writers that you admire, Saul Bellow among them.
Yeah.
Who are you reading now?
Well, you know, even though the reading of fiction isn't as vibrant as it used to be outside of San Francisco, Bay Area, and parts of Brooklyn, in Brookline, Massachusetts, in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, and Austin, you know, it's getting better and better. Yeah. We will survive. But I think the books that are coming out are incredible. And a lot of them are immigrant writers, good Lord. Joe Lahiri, Juna Diaz, Cheng-Rae Lee, whom I already mentioned. This writer, Akil Sharma, has a great book coming out in a couple of months, author and obedient father. Karen Russell is amazing, Sadie Smith. George Saunders. It's a really rich age for amazing fiction that's just begging to be read.
Yeah.
You know. In fact, when I go abroad, I'm shocked by how people abroad, to them, you know, the way French films used to be the deal in the 60s and 70s for American viewers of good taste. American literature really sets the standard, I think, for fiction abroad. I mean, I do readings in Germany that last, 4 hours because, so on page 43, the character is wearing a green sweater, but on page 62, it's magically brown. So my question is, ontologically, you have a character named Eunice. Does this mean you nice? This is the editor of, Der Spiegel or something. Oh, is this going to be broadcast? I love you, Der Spiegel. Interview me again for this book. We'll edit that part out. Oh, God. Deutsche Liberalis.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, what is your next book?
Oh, God. Come on, I'm on tour. Next book, jeez. Well, I want to, I'm just playing around, throwing things out. I kind of wanted to write a thriller because Superset was a science fiction genre. I love genre, A lot of writers play with genre. Cheng-Rae Lee just wrote a science fiction book. Is Zayd doing a science fiction book? I thought she said she. Well, don't call me.
She hasn't called me back.
Somebody's doing a science fiction-ated book. But I love thrillers. It's not just because I watch Homeland over and over and over. I travel all the time. I'm a contributing editor to Travel as well as Leisure magazine. So I'm on the road all the time, and I feel like I know the world pretty well. So I would love to string along a gigantic sort of a book that's in Shanghai, Dubai, Bombay, never call it Mumbai. More with Moscow, maybe Moscow, but I want to get a little bit away from Russia. I feel like I've plumbed that country for so long that I can't go back anymore and have reviews like "Balding Traitor Betrays Motherland."
My question. What is your relationship with Russia?
I go back there to suffer,
Do you have greetings like this there?
Yeah, not as funny. People are like, people looking at the Kalashnikov Assembly Manual. No, but sometimes those readings are sad too. I mean, Russia is, for me, the home of important literature. We were talking about Bellow and Roth before, but 19th century Russian literature has no peers. Nobody can write about the human condition like Chekhov. Nobody can write about the philosophy of religion and win in a way you want to read it like Dostoevsky. Nobody can write about human beings placed against the prism of history like Tolstoy. I mean, these are just, and nobody can write about fathers and sons like Turgenev, the author of Fathers and Sons. This is, for me, this is where it all ends and begins. So, you know, I go to the literature department at St. Petersburg State University, one of the best universities in the country, and I'm excited and also scared. I mean, what are they going to ask me questions that I, in my good but not great Russian, will have to answer, you know? And it's all women, because men are all in business school or, you know, running some racket somewhere. and the first woman, beautiful woman, raises her hand and says, "Do you think Avatar will be made into a novel?"
Serious?
For serious. And I thought, well, okay, it's all over for everyone. And I said, yes. It will be made into a novel.
So I asked Gary earlier, but you might be interested to know that his parents have not read the book yet.
Yeah. So the Family Witness Protection Program.
So that's going to be fun.
Anyone has a house in Tucson they want to lend to me?
Yeah.
No, well, the book is loving, I think. It's,
Yes.
All the reviews were very nice, and then it said that it wasn't, you know, a mommy dearest type book. That it was sort of very even-handed. That made me feel good.
Do you feel sort of resolved with your dad now? Or do you
Yes,
feel like
I
that's
don't know if he's resolved with me, but
Uh-huh.
I do understand him very well. The last chapter of the book, I go back to Russia, and that changes my view of both of them.
Yeah, so talk about that last, well, if you have one more question, but then let's end with you talking about that
Yeah, I
last
have
chapter.
one question
It's
about
so
this.
beautiful.
Yeah, I just wondered whether you feel like you can now have compassion for what they went through as parents coming here to this maelstrom of a country that
Yeah.
is so radically different from what they knew and what they felt comfortable with.
Okay. Well, this dovetails exactly into the last chapter, so thank you for asking that question. I knew they suffered, but the extent of that suffering was a revelation to me. A lot of this book consisted of interviewing my parents and then dragging them back to Russia. They never wanted to go. And I go back almost every year, and they're like, "Why don't you go to Spain or something, you know, with food." My father's first memories growing up, somebody shows up at his door, tells him his father has just been killed in the war. He's 3 or 5 years old. The second memory, they're being evacuated from Leningrad.
The blockade.
Well, they get out before the blockade. The Germans start scraping their train. They have to jump out of the train and hide under the train as the train is bombarded. His best friend dies of starvation. One of his cousins, they're in this horrible village being evacuated. She has to jump out of a window because a pack of rats are chasing her, the little girl. You know. These are the memories. Then he hides under a table for years when they move back. He's in love with classical music, and he wants to be an opera singer throughout his life, and so he sings arias, he hums Tchaikovsky, he cries, he dreams of somehow killing Hitler with his own hands. You know, these are the memories. His father is dead. There's a stepfather who moves in, who, like all stepfathers in literature, is incredibly cruel. That's where the violence begins on his end. On my mother's side, my mother has entire photo albums with headings like Uncle Semyon's family buried alive, Belarus in 1943. Pages and pages of people buried alive. An uncle who escaped, joined the partisans, fought his way all the way to Berlin with the Red Army, wrote a bad poem about a Russian tank, and ended up in the Gulag for 10 years. This is their lives. This is what it was like. It gets better and easier, and they went to college, and they danced, and they listened to ABBA records that were snuck in from Sweden. And
Rah, rah, Rasputin.
Rasputin. Well, my mother's favorite, money, money, money. Always money in a rich man's world. And they did all that, and there was some happiness, and it wasn't all bleak. But that's who they are. And they live in a nice Dutch colonial in a nice part of Queens, and they're retired, and they can spend their lives traveling to Europe or watching Fox News day and night, you know, as their moves move them. But you don't fully escape from that. And I don't fully escape from little failure either, you know. A part of that is always there, it continues to be. Analysis puts it in a little box, but that box is there. And sometimes when you're writing, you have to open that box and let that stuff out. but when you're holding your child close to your chest, the box stays closed. And that's what I've learned in writing this book.
So at the very end, the very last page, you're in a synagogue in St. Petersburg, and you are, going along with the Hebrew, even though you don't really know it. And you have these beautiful, beautiful lines. And I wondered if you would end by just reading this short thing.
I chant the gibberish backwards and forwards, tripping over the words, mangling them, making them sound more Russian, more American, more holy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.